Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to Sunday Live. It's been a while since we've done a non-race Sunday live stream. I hope everybody is well tonight. We're talking about 2021. I don't know if you know, but just before the US Grand Prix, they announced the 2021 regulations, or what they should look like, let's put it that way. But yeah, they kept it quite low-key, hardly mentioned it. But yes, so ready for 2021. We've got a whole season to get through yet and a whole live stream as well. Loads to get through in this one, but I will give you shout outs as I always do at the start. I wanted to bring chat over because I still can't get chat working on the stream, as you'll see in a bit. Good evening to, or good morning to Annette, 5 a.m. In Oz, I believe, where she is, and she was going to stay in bed, but she decided to get up, so good stuff. Hi to James. To Robert, to Daniel, to Jamal, to Steckleton, to Casey, and to Max. Thank you all for coming on. I've seen Dan in chat as well, so no pressure, everyone. We've got to get this one right for Dan, so yeah, anyway, let's just hop straight into this one, really, because so much to get through, and say a very good evening to Jonty. And Jonty, it feels like forever since I've said that.
Yeah, it's been a while, hasn't it? Hello, everyone.
How are you? Are you psyched for 2021 already?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But it's a case of how things are going to happen. What loopholes are there?
Oh, they'll find them, that's for sure. And a very good afternoon, or a very good evening as well. I have to do it this way. I'm so sorry, Stuart. Good evening to the Bear. He is here. Stuart, aka Chain Bear.
Hello, that was weird. How's it going?
Yeah, it's good. It was weird. Apologies. Somebody DM'd me and said I had to introduce you as the Bear on stream tonight, so I said that I would. So there you go. Chain Bear F1, or just Chain Bear now, I think. So need to update your Twitter handle on screen. Sorry about that. I really should pay attention.
That's fine. Yeah, I dropped the F1 now. I'm just Chain Bear, pure and simple.
Plain old Chain Bear. Still as brilliant though. But are you looking forward to 2021?
You know what? I really am. I tend to be, quite optimistic and naive, but actually, I'm quite excited to see how this is all going to unfold. We still got like a year and a half to go till we get racing, but I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, overall, I know we'll get into some specifics a little bit later, but overall, what are your feelings about 2021? I'll start with you, Stuart, seeing I'm kind of with you anyway, but your feelings on it all, what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think of all the sort of revamps in technical regulations I've seen through the decades, this has been the most thought through. I think they're not just sort of reacting to something, but they've actually spent time considering what it is they're trying to do and how to make it happen. And I think that was clear both from what they've come up with and the way they explained it in that press conference and other materials.
Yeah. What about you, Jonty? Just overall feelings on everything?
Oh, it looks great because the main thing I'm super excited about is the fact they've added in the ground effect. So that will open up so much more for them to do with setups at different tracks. It's going to be very, very interesting to see what solutions people.
I had a feeling you'd be up for the ground effects. I don't know why. I was doing some notes this morning. I was like, Jonty's going to love the fact we've got ground effects. It's not the same as the dangerous ones that we've kind of discussed in the past, is it? These are, I don't think, are they as powerful as those? Well, I know the skirts aren't there, are they?
No, they certainly won't be as powerful as we saw sort of the late 70s, early 80s. But we've got more modern technology. The fact that it's not just some skirts and a flat floor. There's sculpting that can be done. There's can be direction that's done with the air. It's going to be very clever, but it all depends on how they've set it in the regulations. That's what I want to know, and obviously no one does yet.
No, it's going to be. Oh, I'm so ready for it. I'm so excited for it. This is going to be brilliant. Like I said at the start, though, we've still got a whole season to get through yet, and we're already talking about 2021, but I think we're going to get a bit more over the next few months. We'll talk about this a bit more at the end, but I get the feeling this isn't the last we've heard on all of this. I think there's going to be a few tweaks yet, but we'll see, hopefully for the positive. But we'll start with, I think, the bit that a lot of people have got most excited about, Stuart, and that's the look of the car. Overall, there is no doubt that car looks a damn sight sexier than it does this year. Some nice sweeping lines in that, but we briefly had a quick chat this morning in Twitter DMs, and we both kind of said the same thing, didn't we? That as great as that car looks, that is just one interpretation of the regulations. As soon as somebody like an Adrian Newey gets hold of that car, there are going to be areas that look probably completely different to what we've got there.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. It's not like a Formula E car or an Indy car where that spec chassis is the same for everybody. This is, and I think they did several examples of this, but this is an interpretation of what fits inside the regulations, and they showed again in their presentation that there were several different design shapes that could fit into those, but obviously they would choose ones that were aesthetically nice to look at. And as we've seen from Formula One, year after year after year, if there's an area to exploit, if there's a place to put a funny looking piece of bodywork that improves the car, that will happen. Aesthetics will be the last thing on people's minds. So again, we haven't seen the specifics, the millimeters and the ruling of dimensions and all that of the regulations, but let's hope the wording is there that allows the cars to sort of keep this basic premise and not have little ugly bits jutting off or stepped parts or all kind of weird things. And again, I think we might not necessarily see the ugliness of these regulations come out straight away. The 2009 cars, which that was a major revamp in the way the cars looked, they kind of all look quite similar at the start, and then started to sort of break out in different directions more as the years went on. So, we may not see the full effects of these regulations right from 2021.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I've been saying pretty much since we saw them that as great as they look, I think back to, I say this on a few streams now, but I think back to 2014's regulations and when they were announced and these really nicely rendered cars that looked fantastic, they were going to be great, and Formula One's going to be saved again, and then we got, well, dildo noses, didn't we? Ultimately, is the only way to describe them. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where they find where they can change things in the regulations, because I was watching the Formula One video today on their website, and they've got like kind of Ross Brawn's had to come out and say, look, there is plenty of room for development. These cars will look different. And they've done this thing on the website where they've kind of gone through how these cars could look different. And aside from the colour changing, I didn't see a huge amount of difference. Obviously, maybe to those that are a bit more technically minded than me, they're probably like, wow, that's completely different. But they didn't look all that different to me. But I think it's safe to say, Jonty, if they look anything like that in 2021, I think we're kind of onto a winner.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone would agree with that, because even though the cars we've got now have improved from sort of the 2016 looking cars that we had, they weren't nice looking. No one would agree that they were nice looking with the eventually smoothed out noses, but they were still a bit steppy, and tall, high, thin rear wings. They were just horrible. These are a vast improvement. And there's a lot of little elements you can see that will help to alleviate the aero problems that we've got. Just looking at the front wing, how the elements go all the way to the nose. That's a massive, massive change. That's all but eliminating the Y250 vortex, which has been the main key of the current front wings for years. So that's a massive challenge for the designers. I'm really, really wondering what they're going to do with that.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think they're very restricted on the front wing, aren't they? Because one of the key things that they were looking for out of this was they've got rid of the barge boards, which, as much as I love a barge board, if you watch the videos from pre-season in 2018, it's all I talked about was sexy barge boards, because I'm really that sad. But it's good to see them go. But they're reducing downforce from the front wing, but then they're going to combat that, as I understand it, with a long diffuser, which is going to generate the downforce needed there. So I'm not, like I said, not the most technically minded, but I'm quite looking forward to seeing how the teams work their way around that reduced downforce on the front.
Yeah, that's another interesting question, because with the ground effect from the Venturi tunnels being brought back in, that could lead to changes with the design of the diffuser. So I'm thinking that they could be trying to shorten the diffusers as much as possible, because you need that extra length of the Venturi tunnels underneath to maximize the pressure differential, as opposed to having a big diffuser to accelerate the air out. As they are now, it could go either way. And that's what interests me. That's how I'm getting excited about what they do, because both directions have benefits.
I'm just going to miss the barge board, Stuart.
Well, I suppose one of the key differences, and especially around barge boards and things, were those were things that you could definitely see when people were developing aerodynamics around the cars. And again, with complex wings, you could see it and sort of have a discussion about it, even if actually it was all a bit voodoo magic. And with all the major room for aerodynamic development moving under the car, I think we will see we'll see less of it. It'll be less obvious. We'll have to wait for a car to be winched on a crane for 100 photographers to like crowd around it to have a sort of idea of what's going on under there. But I think these are the kind of little sacrifices we make to improve things like racing and actually moving a lot of the aerodynamics underneath the car and simplifying the front wing and as Ross Brawn mentioned, making the aerodynamic parts a lot tougher. It means that if there's like a silly first corner accident on that one, that car isn't out of action for the whole race. It can still keep going. It's not suddenly lost 20% of its downforce or massively understeering. So I think, the overall benefits are going to outweigh the joy of seeing a barge board.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, does it matter what these cars look like? I know. Leave me alone, chat. I know exactly what you're going to say. We had this conversation last Sunday, but surely the car looks great. But if the car is a little bit ugly, but the racing's incredible, does it matter that much, Stuart? Or is the way the car look absolutely ingrained into F1's DNA? It's got to look aggressive. It's got to look quick before it even moves, if that makes sense. Do you know what I'm kind of getting at?
I mean, I think we should definitely keep pursuing the aesthetic of the Formula One car, and if sort of weird stuff starts coming out from engineers exploiting loopholes, then yeah, let's address that. But I think number one concern is get these cars raceable, get the on track action more exciting, and close up the field a bit more, make it a bit more competitive. And if 2021 ended up with a bunch of banana nosed cars, but the racing was incredible, I think we'd put up with that for a year and then wait for 2022 for like the FIA to say, okay, well, here's what you got to do to improve the aesthetics. I think number one is just sorting out the on track action, which, I should reiterate, isn't as bad as we sort of sometimes make it out to be. But, with these regulations, we could have a platform for moving forward to making sure the next decade is really, really good.
Liam just said in chat the 2017 cars look fast and aggressive, but the racing was not good.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, a lot of talk actually. I did a news roundup on Friday, and Daniel Ricciardo has said that he believes it was a mistake, and a number of others have as well, that they went to the faster, wider cars because it was detrimental to the racing, because obviously quicker cars doesn't necessarily mean closer racing, or it doesn't mean closer racing, and obviously the circuits were just as narrow, but the cars were wider. So I think I sort of back to what you said at the start, actually, Stuart. Way too many changes over the last few years. Where I think Ross Brawn said it as well, didn't he, in the press conference? To be fair, he alluded to that there were just way too many changes, knee-jerk reactions, which we've talked about before. So I'm hoping that this is all gonna. Look, the caveat I want to put throughout this stream, and I could have just put it up on screen, is in theory and on paper, because I was looking at some figures today. Apparently cars, when they're within one car length of the one in front, could have up to 86% of their available downforce, which is around 30% more than they have now. But then that's followed by the caveat that will reduce as the cars are refined. So it makes me a little bit sceptical, Jonty, but I guess the argument is even 5% is better than what we've got now.
Yeah, absolutely. And following on, there is one element that worries me. Following on from that is that with the 2017 cars, yes, they look super aggressive, and that was when they brought in the wider tyres, which they have identified, and everyone is aware that is one of the biggest problems that's causing so much wake and bad aero now, because they're having to do so much with the wings and the barge boards to try and divert the air around these extra big slabs of rubber that interferes with the car's drag. Why are they staying the same width? I know they're going to the 18-inch rims, which has all sorts of other changes, but they're still saying that wide. Surely that should have been one of the very first things to revert back.
I'd never really thought about that. I mean, all I've really read on the tyres is that obviously larger 18 inches, you've just said there, but also that as far as I know, they've not totally decided on, let's say, specifications for them. I think they want them to be less sensitive, don't they, to what they've got now. But there seems to be a bit of confusion and there's still a bit of debating to do over the tyres. But I'd never really thought about them being narrowed down, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just one of those things that seems strange to me. We know they're one of the big issues that's causing all the bad aero, and these rule changes are focused on cleaning up the aero to improve the racing. And yet that's one of the things that's not been touched. Although with regard to the wheels, that's another big thing that's going to be very, very interesting to see how they perform, because that's a lot of suspension work that will have to be done, because half of the shock absorption is in the tire wall.
Yeah, and I mean, there's changes to the wheels as well, isn't there, and the suspension. So quite might not seem like a lot of change in that area, but there really is. I mean, is there anything you wanted to say on tyres, Stuart?
Yeah, I just sort of add to that slightly. I'm not entirely sure why they've specifically, decided not to address the width of the tires. Part of it may be, but because Pirelli are also sort of um, changing philosophy, or have been asked to change philosophy about how their tires work, that they sort of are able to operate at their peak for longer. It may be easier for them to just keep the dimensions the same and work on the compound. But also the larger rims of the tire mean, like as Jonty alluded to, that the rubber part of the tire doesn't do the sort of suspension-y wobbling aboutness, and that the movement of the rubber part of the tire does cause a lot of aerodynamic instability, which is very hard for the teams to sort of simulate and get a handle on, and be part of the thing that F1 teams try and create sort of aerodynamic devices to divert all the air around. So I I'm not as concerned about the width of the tires, because if they restrict the way teams can manipulate the air around the tires, then it doesn't really matter that much, because if we're getting rid of barge boards, if we're getting rid of complex front wings, then I think they're just going to have to live with whatever complex air the tires throw up. But I think it'll actually be better with these larger rim tires than it has been.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, tyre blankets as well staying put now, aren't they, for 2021 and 22, I think, but could be ditched in 2023. I'm not sure. I don't know if they're going to go anywhere, but I think, are they going to be standardised now? Did I read that somewhere? The tyre blankets, or they're trying to get them standardised?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're going to be one of the standard parts that I think will be tendered out to someone. Another sort of interesting part of these regulations is that kind of three different types of like parts, be them
Yeah,
spec, tender, or open source, which is really fascinating.
I like that there are going to be the options there for teams who are not as well off financially to be able to kind of go out and buy things from other places, as well as also being forced to make other things themselves. I quite like that, because I think that kind of, it almost, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? It almost gives the customer teams a bit more validity in the championship, and it's still a manufacturer's championship, isn't it? Very much, Mercedes, Ferrari are still going to be very much in control, but it just gives them a bit more, I guess, a bit more weight. I don't know. I know what I'm trying to get at. I'm just, yeah, I can't think of the word. But a couple of other things around suspension. Hydraulic suspension and inertia are going to be banned for simplified suspension overall. I think that's, I've got to be honest, as a fan of the racing, that means nothing to me. I'm sure there's a very good reason behind it, but yeah, I'm not overly technically minded on that. So I was a big fan of the idea of banning things, or at least standardising parts that didn't really make any difference to most fans, if I'm being honest. A bit disappointed more wasn't standardised. That's going to go down well. We've also got a freeze on gearbox development, which I don't think comes as a big surprise, to be honest, Jonty. And the power unit also pretty much staying the same, isn't it? There's not much happening there apart from it's getting a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, sadly. I mean, I know we're going to be staying with the hybrid system, but if there's just one change I want them to make, is change it to a VR5 or inline 5 instead of a V6 because it sounds so much better.
Jonty likes his noisy engines. Or not even, it's just the better noise, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not noisier. It's just such a sweeter note that you get from it because it's the perfect firing sequence.
Are you... I mean, they are. I know Formula One hasn't been road relevant for a long time, but a lot of the technology in the hybrid power units has been used now in road cars. That's what's keeping the manufacturers in the sport, if you listen to some people. But are you pleased that they're sticking with the hybrid, or would you have liked to have seen the MGUH go?
MGUH, yes. I think they should stay hybrid, but just keep it on the MGUK because the MGUH is just excessive complexity that keeps the cost and the risk up.
What about you, Stuart?
I mean, what Jonty said, that makes a lot of sense. I think the idea was to just keep things as they were for the sake of simplicity and cost. I think it would be a lot more work to do another sort of rethinking of how the basic engine and power unit, would work if you changed it to a flat 5 or something. You'd have to sort of almost start from scratch in a lot of ways. So I think they're very, very happy with the way these power units are. They constantly say they are, the most efficient engines in the whole world. So I think they're quite happy to keep them as they are and address this problem down the road. I think they kind of thought this isn't a problem we need to address right now, and we've sort of settled into these power units a bit more so we can bring the cost down and stuff. So I'm not as worried about it. It's kind of the same as when they try and revamp qualifying. It's like, maybe we don't need to be spending our energy here right now.
Do you think, I was kind of pondering this earlier, do you think as well the fact that no new manufacturers wanted to join meant that Liberty and the FIA had a bit less weight behind them? Because I guess what I mean is, if you've got, say, Audi, Porsche and BMW saying, hey, we'll join if you do the regulations this way, at least they could say to Ferrari and Mercedes, well, if you don't like it, then leave, because I've got 3 manufacturers waiting. Whereas if they've got nobody to back them up, there's no point ripping up the power unit rules and upsetting the 3-4 manufacturers you have got in the sport.
Oh, I definitely think if 3 big manufacturers have been knocking at the door and saying, we'll come if you do this, this, and this, then we definitely start to see some movement in that direction. Whether or not would have been a decent bargaining chip for the other teams, that's an interesting point. But I definitely think they had less need to make a big movement without the other manufacturers showing particular interest. I think it was, again, it was a cost thing as well for a lot of the manufacturers. So maybe if they can take a few years to show that you can run an F1 team efficiently, then we might see other people having a look again.
I mean, these power unit regulations should keep Mercedes, Ferrari, probably Honda quite happy. I don't think Honda are going anywhere, but we could still lose a manufacturer despite them staying static, because it's kind of on topic but not really. 2021, Renault possibly on their way out. Apparently the new CAO is not a big fan of Formula One, thinks that it's not a waste of money, but thinks the money could be better spent. And there's even some talk, Jonty, I've been doing way too much reading on this, there's some reports online, do not quote me on this is pure speculation, that they could even leave as early as the end of this year. I highly doubt that, but I could see them walking away at the end of 2020.
I would have said that was possible until the news of them signing Pat Fry to head up the development for 2021 came out. Because this year's just gone from bad to worse for them. And I mean, we spoke about this quite a bit with the whole braking thing, with the various reports coming out of, it's actually they've been using it for years. And they suddenly went very, very quiet and said, no, we're not going to appeal, we'll just take it. Which I thought was very suspect. So they're just keeping their heads down to the end of the year, and then we'll see what happens. But I don't think they'll be leaving.
I'm still sceptical on that one, because I mean, yeah, they've got Pat Fry on board, they've rejigged their department, but that's the F1 side of the Renault group saying that it could well easily be that the CEO's had enough and he pulls out at the end of 2020. But I will say, I think we should stop referring to them as Renault and Benetton. We should just call them the Enstone team, because somebody will buy that team, Stuart, surely, if Renault pulled out, because that is a group of people and facilities that you definitely want to be picking up if you're somebody who's considering entering Formula One.
Oh yeah, they're not short of resources or good people, are they? And that team has a long history. It's how many names has that particular team had over the years? Yeah, 100%. If Renault pull out, well, I say 100%. We've lost massive facilities before when the buyer just didn't show up. But I would imagine someone would quietly slip in there and take that slot if Renault did decide to leave.
I hope not. I'd hope Honda stay as well. I'd really, because the Honda story's great. They were nowhere, and now all of a sudden they're finding form. So it'd be great to see what they can do for 2021 with hopefully Red Bull. So I'm pretty sure Honda will stick around. I don't think they're going anywhere, and I think Ferrari and Mercedes are a given. I can't see them leaving. Although, as far as I know, teams haven't actually signed the Concord Agreement yet, have they?
No, not that I've heard yet. Yeah, we've yet to get everyone sort of back in line again for the next few years.
I wonder how long that's going to rumble on for. A lot of teams saying that they're a good starting point, aren't they, with these regulations? So I wonder if that might rumble on a few months yet, but we'll see. Couple of areas they're making the power unit a bit cheaper, which I think is needed. They are increasing the weight, commercially available materials, non-exotic. I have no idea what that means. If either of you want to enlighten me what non-exotic means in terms of available materials.
Yeah, it's just alloys and minerals and materials that are hard to get and are therefore very expensive. So I think beryllium is one of the banned elements because it's just expensive for doing the same job that like titanium could do.
Yeah, and is incredibly difficult and toxic to machine and work with.
So not just doesn't contain mango then, which was what I assumed.
It also doesn't contain mango.
There you go. So I'm technically right. That'll do. Standard fuel pumps and non-exclusivity for ES cells and the turbocharger supplier. Yeah, not much to say on that really. They're just basically what they are, but a bit cheaper. Interesting point. Now, manufacturers are now obliged to offer equal spec to all customer teams, but as far as I'm aware, it's up to the customer teams if they choose to use them, but they've got to be offered. So Mercedes, for example, would have to say to Racing Point, here's our power unit with all its juicy goodness, and here are all your engine modes and your mapping, and here's the fuel we're using. But if Racing Point were to do a deal with their own fuel supplier, I don't know why they would, but if they did, then they aren't obliged to use it, but manufacturers are obliged to offer it. I believe that's how it's going, Jonty.
Yeah, to me, that whole part seems a bit like just making the public aware that, look, it's all completely fair. They have the choice, but it won't actually do much.
Completely CR in chat says, I thought Merck did that already. I thought they were already obliged to. That's what, unless that's just not been written in the regulations and was a gentleman's agreement, and now it's official in black and white. But I thought it was already a must.
I think they have to offer them this year's spec engine, but I don't think they have to offer them the sort of every
Maps
upgrade that they make. And I think this is also and I may be wrong, I may be interpreting this wrong, but I think this is also meant to kind of slow down the upgrade process over the year. So if Mercedes, make an engine upgrade, they have to have it ready for all of their teams. They can't just show up and shove it in the main car. So they can't be just turning up every weekend with a sort of revised bit here and a revised bit there. They have to have it ready for everybody should the other teams call for it.
Okay. So it was kind of, as Jonty kind of said there, it was, yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you now. Thank you very much to Just Cows, by the way, who dropped a contribution a little bit earlier in the chat. Thank you for that. It's massively appreciated. I think you can do stickers or something on YouTube now. Something I got an email about. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. One thing, I am going to just come away from the technical side for a second, and I need to do this. One thing I'm very excited about, very, very excited about, and extremely happy about, is that there's been a bit of a revamp to Fridays. which is quite nice. Scrutineering will now take place for FP1. Teams are free to run any of their new parts they want to trial that they want through FP1 and FP2, but the car has got to be returned to its pre-FP1 spec. What that essentially means is that the car that is scrutineered on a Friday morning is the same car that will race on Sunday. I mean, that in itself, Jonty, is pretty huge. But what's that saying? How does it go? There was a farmer who had a job, and bingo was his name, I think. Yeah, anyway, Jonty. Had to get that one in. We'll talk about that one later, Stuart, before you disappear. Do you like that? That we're going to have car scrutiny firstly on a Friday and then that's the car racing on Sunday?
Yeah, but it seems a bit weird because that puts a hell of a lot of work on the teams just for testing out new bits. If they're going to then take them all off and completely return the car back to its original spec. To me, that says it should happen after FP2. So that you've still got FP3 as, that's what will race on Saturday and they can just tweak their setups as opposed to testing out new bits. It seems just the timing of it's a bit odd because all it's going to do is add massive amounts of work for the team. At least that's how my brain's thinking of it.
No, it's a fair point. What do you think, Stuart? Do you like that?
Yeah, I think it's going to play out the way Jonty says. I think what this essentially does is it allows Friday to be a sort of a test session rather than a practice session. Should they wish, they can, test new parts, figure out where they're going with development with some on-track action, and then whack the car back to race spec for Saturday so they can have FP3 as a sort of practice and qualifying, as usual. I think this is similar to what I was talking about with the power units. This is sort of to slow down the kind of massive rate of upgrades. So they can't bring 3 different types of front wing and then kind of fiddle around with them on the all Friday and Saturday and figure out which ones they want to use Saturday and Sunday. They just are allowed to test new parts and then go back home and think about whether they want to use them or how they want to use them, and then that's it. So I think it adds an extra dimension to the weekend. I think it makes things a little harder for the teams. They can't just, throw masses of parts at the car. I can't imagine it'll change very much about how the weekends go, but I'm excited to see sort of condensed version of events.
Yeah, drivers' press conference has been switched from Thursday to Friday to before practice one. I've got to say, that's not a big deal. It will be for the teams. Obviously, it's one less day that they've got to be at the circuit. But I would quite have liked, if they were going to move the press conference to a Friday, I'd quite like it if they'd have done the press conference after FP2, because I think that would mean more. It'd be more relevant. Because I always find when I watch the press conference on a Thursday that it's not really... It's mostly just silly season talk and, how do you expect this weekend to go? At least after FP2, the drivers can go, well, the car feels like crap, or this is going to be brilliant, we're going to have a good weekend. Do you know what I mean, Jonty? I think after FP2, it would just be a bit more of a relevant press conference.
Yeah, true. Although, with the technology we've got now, and I say let's have the press conference during FP2. That'd be great fun. I've long said if they're going to keep using so much of the radio for the coverage, do something with it. The teammates talk to each other or something. It'd be awesome. If they can have people asking them questions during free practice, that would give a lot more interaction. And I think a lot of people would really enjoy it, and it would get the viewing numbers up for practices.
Could you imagine Russia, those opening laps with the Ferraris bickering over team orders, if the drivers could talk to each other? How good that would be.
Yeah, it'd be awesome.
I'd be up for that. That'd be mad.
The racing points at Baku.
Oh, God. Oh, let's not get back into that one. I'll only start upsetting Perez fans again. But yeah, part firm conditions coming into effect from the start of FP3 rather than Q1 is the other change to the weekend. And I don't know, that's a big difference. It's 1 hour, isn't it? if you like, earlier in terms of track action, so I don't think it made too much of a difference. But does it take some relevance away from FP3? Do you think, no, Stuart? Because if they can't make any changes, really, after the start of FP3 between that and qualifying, then what's the point in FP3?
Well, I think you're just going to set up work, doing some simulation runs, preparing yourself for qualifying. I think this is all going to be preparation rather than fiddling with the car. Yeah, just you can work out how the tires work over certain runs. Yeah, it's. I think these rules are definitely moving towards you lock your car down early on and you live with it. And practice is going to be about learning how the car works, making your strategies and things like that, rather than doing a lot of mechanical tinkering, which some teams can put more resources into than others.
I wonder if we might see I know it's not a big thing again, but I wonder if we might see a shift to teams programs for practice. Like maybe we'll see more qualifying laps in FP2 and more long runs in FP3 because it's less relevant. It'll be interesting to see how they go around that one, but it's not a huge change, is it really? One thing I think I'm pretty sure we're all going to be pretty happy with. All teams must run a driver who has competed in no more than 2 Grand Prix in 2 FP1 sessions a season. Like I've said before, we see this with Williams all the time, for example, with Nicholas Latifi, and I think who else has done it this year? I think Alpha might have done. Maybe not this year, maybe last year, but we do see it from some of the teams lower down the grid. But now every single team has got to do that, and it's going to give those who maybe don't watch the likes of F2 and F3 or any of the feeder series really a chance to see some of these young drivers in action. And I think with the in-season testing being reduced again next year, the pre-season testing being reduced, the opportunities for these drivers to get in the cars are getting less and less. So I think that is a big change from a young driver's perspective, Jonty, and I'm really pleased to see that.
Yeah, absolutely overjoyed with that one. Really, really happy that they're pushing, like you say, just the chance for people to see and hear these new drivers, see what they can do, even if it's just a free practice session, but it's a big test for them to be able to do all of the things the team want when they're stepping in the car for the first time. It's fantastic. And I will get in early and say, you watch, more than half of these sessions for Dora also will have Tsunoda. You can guarantee it.
Not necessarily young drivers either, does it? But I think, I like that one. Somebody in chat there saying drivers need to focus as it scrolled up and I've missed it, so apologies if I missed your name. But I get that, but 4 hours, isn't it? 4 hours of testing? Yeah, 4 hours of testing over a weekend. I think that's more than enough. It'll be fascinating to see how the teams at the front handle it, Stuart, when it comes to the championship and things like that, and they're trying to get their cars set up for championship fights. Do Mercedes, for example, do they put their young driver in place of Bottas one weekend and Hamilton another, or both weekends in place of Bottas or Hamilton? That's the bit that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, and I think that'll be something they sit down as a team and sort of work out what's fair, in the same way they kind of work out who gets to go out first in qualifying weekend on weekend. But I think this is definitely a positive development. I think 2 weekends is a little bit meager, to be honest. I'm hoping that'll be extended further down the line, because we are seeing a lot less opportunities for young drivers and less experienced drivers to understand the Formula One car, work with the team, get some on-track action and stuff, as you said. So yeah, I think this will be good, and I think we definitely need to see more top teams doing this kind of thing, because at the moment we're sort of seeing it in the I guess Class B side of the field.
I was going to leave this till a little bit later in the stream, but it kind of fits in with the Friday revamp because of why they've had to move things around. But the maximum number of races for a season has been increased to 25, which you could probably tell from my tone there I'm totally a fan of. 25 race calendar. Chase Carey has said, well, that's the maximum. Don't take that as a target. That is the absolute maximum. The way I look at that, the skeptic in me, why increase the maximum if you have no intention of hitting that target? They are desperate for a 25 race calendar. And actually, when you start looking at things like maybe if Germany returns, they do get this race in Miami, all of a sudden you're getting very close to that 25 race calendar. But that is getting on for half a year, Stuart. We're going to have a lot of back-to-backs. We're going to have some terrible decisions in terms of moving stuff around the world like we've got next year, a week to get stuff from Canada to Baku or whichever way around it is. That's a lot of races. I think that is way too many, personally, especially for a sport that, as we're going to talk about in just a moment, is looking to cap costs.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think there are a couple of things on this. And I think the first most important thing is the idea of it being a maximum means they don't have to renegotiate with the teams every single time they want to like extend the calendar. Now, whether extending the calendar is a good thing or not is a whole different issue. But like when I started watching F1, I think 17 was the limit, and every time they wanted to add more events, they had to get all the teams to agree, sort of make some deals, kind of work a little bit of money behind the scenes to make it work. So I think this means that they could do whatever they want up to 25 races, whether they necessarily do that or not. If they do go to the full 25 races, and I think you're right, I think I think more is better. I kind of disagree. Again, when I started watching F1, it was basically once a fortnight, and if we did that with 25 races, that's the whole year gone.
Yeah.
We'd have non-stop Grand Prix, which
You'd have Christmas off, wouldn't you? That'd be it.
Yeah. So yeah, lots of back-to-back races. If they did that, they have to think more cleverly about how they group races geographically together. We're already moving all over the place for seemingly no good reason sometimes. I don't, I think Liberty were onto kind of a good idea when they started talking about kind of grouping the calendar into regions. So you'd have a European leg, you'd have an American leg, you'd have a sort of Asian leg. Um, just to stop these like 1,000-mile journeys every time you go to a race. But apart from all of that, I do think 25 is too many. It's exhausting as it is. I mean, it's exhausting working in this industry, let alone being a fan. I know some fans just get a bit tired after about 20 races. So yeah, and I think having fewer races increases the value of each race. So I don't really understand exactly what they're going for here.
To me, it should be quality over quantity. And with all due respect to tracks like Sochi, for example, I know they were designed with the best intentions, but they don't always give us the best racing. So, do we want a calendar full of Sochis and Abu Dhabis, or would we rather have fewer races and have a calendar with, the Nürburgring Grand Prix circuit on and the likes of Silverstone? And do you know what I mean? I think they are more important. Is that I think somebody said it in chat, actually. I'm just trying to see if I can spot who it was. Maybe not. But somebody said in chat, as long as you're getting the likes of Hockenheim or the Nürburgring, then it's okay. But if you're just getting these really rubbish tracks like Paul Ricard, I think it's going to be a hell of a grind. Rhetorical Resources are saying the triple header last year was a grind for everybody. We'd surely have to see a triple header or two in a season if we're going to have 25. Annette saying they should race in regions. I know you're a big fan of that one, Jonty, definitely. 25 is way too many, says, is it Uzair? And Neil says 21 to 22 is more than enough. 22 next year, so that's going to be interesting to see how we all get through that one. As fans, I'm sure we love it, but I suppose if the racing's good, it doesn't really matter, Jonty. But 25, I can't get on board with that.
No, it is too many, but it's too many because of the amount of stuff the teams take with them, the amount of time the teams need. It's not actually that much of an issue for the drivers. If you want to go back to the 60s, Jim Clark did 63 races in 1965 across 4 or 5 different series. And it took twice as long to get anywhere then because it was 3 or 4 flights to get to Australia, not just one. It's the teams that this affects the most, not the drivers, which is massively unfair on them, especially when they're needed even more than the drivers already.
Where would you put the maximum?
20. But yeah. I do suspect, all right, tinfoil hats on, but I would reckon this is Liberty getting that limit in now so that they can stick 3 or 4 American races in if the opportunity arises, so they can have a massive big American leg to really bump things up there because they know it's such a huge market. And if the reg changes work and the racing is amazing, that's just basically free money.
Well, you both mentioned there like a North American leg. I mean, I think they've got it spot on this season. We've had it other seasons as well that we've gone Mexico, US, Brazil. That makes sense logistically. Whereas next year, Canada to Baku in a week, in fact less than a week, they've got to be there by Thursday. It doesn't make sense.
Stupid.
It is stupid, and it's like at least leave 2 weeks between them. But I know that you can't. I think you can't move Canada to the end of the year because of the weather, and you can't bring some of the races from North America to where Canada is because of the concerns over weather. So I know there are reasons behind it, but at least if you're going to have that big haul, at least have a couple of weeks between those races. It just seems absolute madness. And I don't know about the situations with Abu Dhabi and Bahrain. There are some people that say that they've paid to be kept apart, but otherwise, why can't they be clubbed together?
And the whole thing with Abu Dhabi being the last race, and they want, the kudos, the prestige of that. Let them be the first. I think we'd all be quite happy with Abu Dhabi being the first track.
Get out of the
because
way.
we get all the glitz and the glamour, and the start of every year, the first race of every year, no one's quite sure where everyone is. We've all obviously got an idea, but it's never certain. And, that would add a little bit of spice that Abu Dhabi needs for its racing. So make that first, Bahrain second, makes far more sense.
And as much as I love Albert Park, I do, and this is going to surprise a few, I think the racing would probably be better at Abu Dhabi at the start of the season than it is at Albert Park. That's effectively a street track, isn't it? So,
yeah, Albert Park's lost its mojo, I think, with the way the cars have gone. But again, 2021, that could all change.
Obviously, this is all going to have an impact on finances. Just look at that. That's a beautifully seamless link. Terrible. Financial regulations. We've got a whole new set of regulations. Are you excited by this? I know I am. I'm really not. Technical, sporting, and now financial regulations. First time in F1 history, I believe, that these are going to be written into the rules. A cost cap of $175 million for a 21 race season. That's going to increase and decrease by $1 million for every race gain loss. So I think the theory behind that is a 25 race calendar would be 179 million, and then an 18 race calendar would be 172 million. But there is a cost cap which comes into effect from 2021. Pretty much centered around what the car does on track. There are exclusions. I think they include, there's the driver's salary, some other driver stuff in there. Your top 3 earners in the team, they're not going to be included in these regulations. So there are things that aren't going to be in there, but they do cover quite a bit. Basically everything that happens on track is how I understand it. So, but it does mean, and I agree with Christian Horner massively on this. He said that next year could be the most expensive in F1's history because the cost cap doesn't come into force until after the technical regulations have already been looked at and the cars have been developed. So next year, in theory, as I've said before, Mercedes could spend £1 billion on their car if they want to, because they're not subject to the cost cap, which means they could turn up in 2021, Stuart, with a huge advantage. So I was a big fan, I don't know how you feel about it, of having the cost cap introduced either next year or 2021, and then having the technical regulations a year later.
Yeah, I mean, I do understand that point of view. I think Christian Horner's exaggerated it a little bit because teams are still limited in wind tunnel time, in CFD time. They still have strict limits on those at the moment. So there's only so much work they can put in, and they still have to fight a 2020 campaign. I mean, I guess they don't, but if they don't, if they put all their resources into 2021, they're going to have a really, really bad year next year. So yes, I think there will be a huge amount of resources from the rich teams next year into 2021, but I don't think the discrepancy will be that high. And I know you were reaching for an absurdly high number, but I don't think Mercedes could really throw $1 billion useful dollars at this problem. But it is going to be a huge challenge next year, deciding on sort of where to place your resources, especially, with these big changes coming in for 2021, and the opportunities there to get a leg up on other people when the rules change, like Mercedes did last time, and they're still going strong. but I'm not as concerned about this runaway spending next year. And also, I think you just there are sometimes you just have to take a hit to get some of the
Yeah.
good things out of these rules, and I think that's what they decided was acceptable, because they weren't going to be able to force a cost cap in for next year. What I am interested in, and I haven't quite figured out how this works, is that there's going to be sort of like voluntary, like adhering to the cost cap next year, so they can test. They're not basically going to penalise anyone for going over the cost cap next year, but it's sort of like a trial period, and I'm not really sure what they mean by that at all.
As I understand it, they can. I think it's June 2020. They can submit their 2019 figures to do like a dry run to make sure everything's working and they understand the system, and then at the end of March 2021, they have to submit their 2020 financial information.
Mm-hmm.
But if they breach any regulations, they won't be penalised because that's pre 2021. So they're again just essentially testing the water, and then it's mandatory submission of financial info from the end of March 2022, and that's penalty, and that could be penalties up to championship exclusion. What was it Ross Brawn said? These rules have teeth. But do you find that odd as well, Stuart, that we could find ourselves in a situation, hypothetically speaking, at the end of March 2022, where the championship winning team overspent and they could be stripped of their title 4-5 months after they've been crowned champions? That's going to get messy.
Yeah, that was going to be my next point as well. It's and again, there's not really an easy way around that because finances and stuff, it doesn't all get squared off immediately. You can't just sort of hand in a piece of paper at the end of Abu Dhabi and say, "Here's my finances for the year." Is that the machine still keeps working and things get paid off and put through for the next few months, and so they're sticking to the financial year. So let's hope it doesn't come down to that, because that would suck.
Yeah. Suddenly we've got 5 teams who have spent $150 million on sundries.
I'm intrigued by what you mean by sundries. I'm like, what could they spend $150 million on?
Well, that's the thing. When I was looking through the things that aren't covered by it, there was so much scope for a clever accountant to work that around. Saying like, was it fuel development? Green fuel development costs are not included. You know, how easy or difficult would it be for them to turn around and say, yes, well, we've developed this new green fuel, which isn't covered by the cost cap, but because of this new green fuel, we've had to develop new fuel filters and new fuel flow metering systems and new fuel pumping systems to work with it. So clearly, they can't be included in the cost cap either.
The loopholes are there, aren't they? You kind of look at stuff. I think there are some exceptions to certain activities away from the track for manufacturers. I believe I might be wrong on that, but I think there are. So you could find that. I love the way you put a clever accountant. It is so true. They just need somebody really smart with numbers that can play about with this a little bit. I mean, you'd hope F1 teams were all open and honest, and as they have been for so many years, that they wouldn't want to try and find their way around them. But I mean, I am a big fan of the cost cap. To be fair, Jonty, I think it's good. But I don't, teams aren't going to be spending 100. Williams aren't going to spend 175 million. Haas are not going to spend 175 million. That is something that you'd imagine Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull are going to hit absolutely on the nose every single year. So it's definitely, it has the potential to close the field up in terms of performance, but I still think we are going to have a clear top 3 and then the rest of the field, which is going to ruin everybody's day. So I apologise for that one.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's some things they've done right, because engine development's not included, which kind of makes sense because you've got 3 teams and a non-team effectively spending on the engine development, which is more for them. But then you also have to think is that they get that back with selling the power units. So any disparity there has got to be monitored, because they could be getting loads and loads of free money or loads and loads of free development, depending on how the costs there pan out. And there's other elements that they really should have thought about. The stuff like all of the stuff you see in the paddock with the massive motorhomes and all the rest of it, that does have a massive benefit for the teams. Someone's basically got, a spare Ritz hotel they can drag around with them to retire to after a day's work. It's going to be a lot better than people who are going back to a caravan. And I think the things like that should have been looked at a bit more, especially when you consider the overall impact of F1 trying to reduce its carbon footprint and its travelling costs.
I wonder if that's something that will get refined a bit more over time, because I know they've said that the cost cap is in place, or this 175 million is in place for the next sort of 2021, 22. I want to say 23 and 24. I might be wrong on that, but I think there is a stage after that where, under the new governance, which is going to make things interesting, and the new voting, the way they're going to go about things, they could easily cut that cost cap if they wanted to with just a majority, couldn't they, of votes? So I wonder if that 175 million was to appease Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, and we might find in 5 years' time that that's dropped by another 25 million, and then other things that probably should be included do get included. So as I said at the start, I don't think this is the last we've heard of this. The teams keep talking about it being a really good starting point, and that instantly rings alarm bells for me, because it makes me think, well, no offence, but what are Ferrari up to is one of the first things that springs into mind when I hear them going, oh, yeah, we really, really like this one. That's a good idea. But, it's a good starting point. You think, oh, God, what have they got planned? What have they got as a bargaining chip? But I do find the teams have been quite quiet on it all, Stuart. I mean, first of all, are you a fan of the cost cap? And secondly, do you think it is something that is going to get refined, or teams are going to really try and fight against in the future?
So yeah, firstly, I am a fan of the cost cap. This is something that they've been trying to put, not teams, but the FIA and Formula One have been trying to sort of put in place for over 10 years. I mean, this nearly broke Formula One apart in, I want to say 2008, 2009.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
So I am really glad that they've found something that the teams can agree on, and that makes it a really good starting point. Which is a term I think everybody's been using. The teams have been using it. Formula One have been using it because I think they're aware, as they've seen every time they've changed the rules in any capacity, things come out that are unexpected. You start to learn about how these rules actually work in practice, and then you can sort of refine them. And that's my optimistic look at what it's a good starting point means. But yeah, I am aware that for a lot of people that means this is a good starting point for negotiations and wiggle room. Yeah, I think we've sort of seen over the last 10 years come to pass what the FIA were concerned about, which is runaway costs, a split between rich and poor, people spending absurd amounts of money to make tiny gains. And even though there is a cost cap, it is a very, very big cost cap. As you've said, a lot of the teams won't even hit that cost cap. So all it's kind of doing is just attempting to put a ceiling on, how much that field could spread out. And, if teams are really good with their money, if they're really efficient, if they can get the most out of the amount they're allowed to spend, then we could see some upsets. We could see some, like that one time that Toro Rosso won a race, or the time that sort of Jordan, which are now Racing Point, came third in the championship and were looking for the title in 1999. That's the kind of, we want to have some surprises. We want to have people sneaking in and some underdogs actually being able to capitalize on their good work.
Yeah, F1 said on their website in their article that they think it will give, or it should give, more teams a chance to fight for podiums. I don't know if this is just because of sort of recent years with rule changes and whatnot. I'm still going to err on the side of caution with it. I am hopeful that these financial regulations will close up the field. I'm hopeful that the changes to the car are going to give us better racing. But as we've kind of already gone through, we've heard this a lot over the years. 2014, it's going to be so much better. 2009, it did work in 2009, to be fair. I think fantastic season in 2009. But even then, you still had a dominant team at the start of the season and one that was better at the end of the sort of top three, didn't you? It wasn't like the whole field were within a second of each other. So I think we do need to err on the side of caution. But I'm going to put this question to you guys. I'll put it to chat, and I'm going to take a few comments from chat as well before we roll on to anything else we want to discuss, because just take kind of a little bit of a break from it. But I do want to put this question to both of you. I feel bad because I have already asked Jonty this, so I already know his answer. I asked him last weekend, but I am going to be putting you on the spot with it, Stuart, so I do apologise. But I'll go to
Hit me.
Jonty first to give you some thinking time. I'll be nice. All of these 2021 regs, Jonty, is this F1's final roll of the dice, or are we still going to be having this conversation in 20 years' time when we're waiting for the 2041 regulations?
That question.
That question.
There's a large part of me that thinks it is, because we're seeing such a big push for other series at the moment, certain electron-based ones, that they've got to get it right, because with all of the paywall issues and availability going down and down and down, the audience is going down globally. We know that. They have got to get it absolutely bang on, or else they really will be in danger of disappearing.
Same question to you, Stuart. I'm so sorry. Right on the spot.
That's probably more dramatic than I would have put it, but I tend to agree with Jonty's sentiment. I think, I mean, obviously it's not going to be the last roll of the dice in terms of refining and revolutionizing the rules in years to come. I think what is important is they sell the idea of these regulations being the start of a new generation from which they could develop one, and that any problems that come out of them are problems that can be fixed and problems that F1 isn't going to be blind to. And I think we've seen F1 kind of closing their eyes and ears when things start to go wrong with regulations before, and sort of not listening. And I think this time we're seeing people listening and paying attention and trying to be mindful of what's actually happening. So I think if F1 becomes a sport in which us as the audience are confident that any problems will be noticed and ironed out and taken seriously, then I think even if these initial set of regulations 2021 end up being a bit rubbish, that we will still thrive. But Jonty's absolutely right. This whole debacle with paywalls and vanishing audiences and other more easily accessible and sometimes more exciting sports coming along means F1 does need to sort of cement itself as actually being a good quality product and not living off the prestige of the name going forward.
Yeah. So what I meant to say, just to clarify my point, is the fact that in the past when they've had these problems, there hasn't been anything to threaten. And whether you take the threat of Formula E, Super Formula, the big increase in popularity that IndyCar's had the last few years, outside of America, even if you don't take those threats seriously, they are still threats, and everyone's never had that to fight against before. That's the big worry.
See, the thing with the paywall, exactly the point I was going to make, was that these cars can be the most beautiful cars the world has ever seen. They can be, the races could be the best on the planet. If fans can't watch it, it's irrelevant. It doesn't matter how good the racing is. It doesn't matter how good the cars look if everything is locked behind a paywall. And I know not every country has that, and I'm maybe talking specifically, or I am talking specifically from a UK point of view, but Motorsport Broadcasting on Twitter put up a tweet that said 13 million people, over 13 million people in the UK, tuned in to watch Lewis Hamilton win his first title in 2008. I don't know what the figures are for him winning his 6th world title. I don't think anybody does yet. I'd be surprised if Channel 4 and Sky managed 3 million between them on Sunday on highlights and the live. That's a huge kick in the for Formula One. And at the end of the day, if fans can't watch it, it doesn't matter how good the rules are. It doesn't matter how good the cars look. But I don't think F1's going to die. I've seen a few people in chat talking about it. I don't think it'll die. I think even if it does lose popularity, it'll still be around in 20, 30, 40 years' time, because F1's a stubborn sport. I don't think there's any doubt about that, with a very loyal, devoted, stubborn fan base. Very stubborn at times if you read comment sections on YouTube and Twitter. But the point is, and I've always said this, and I made the point to Jonty the other day, what Formula E, as you've both mentioned it, so I can now mention it, as Formula E does They do it brilliantly. They get it in front of as many people as they can. They know they can't compete with Formula One in terms of viewership, but they also know that getting it on free-to-air, getting it in front of as many people as possible, it's only going to grow in popularity. Lock it behind a paywall, it'll go nowhere, because the thing is, I don't want to depress people on a Sunday afternoon, but I love Formula One. Stuart does, Jonty does. Your Keith Collantines, for example, your Joe thingy, he does, and your Dieter Renkers, they all love Formula One. There's no doubt about that whatsoever. We're not going to be here forever to keep watching it, and there has to be another generation coming through to watch Formula One. And at the moment, I always think about 6-year-old Sean. It's so dramatic. But 6-year-old Sean, 1992, first F1 race, watching it with his granddad on his boat, South African Grand Prix, Nigel Mansell winning the race. That memory will live with me forever. I could watch Formula One. I managed to grow up watching Formula One on free-to-air TV. There is no way in hell, without making my parents sound awful, but there is no way in hell my family could have afforded £30, £35 a month for me to watch that on Sky. But also, I wouldn't know what Formula One was at 6 years old. Do you see what I'm getting at? Whereas Formula E I could have caught on the BBC or caught on YouTube and I'd be hooked on it, and that would be what I would have grown up watching. So it's vital that they get this from behind the paywall in the UK and other countries as well, and get these younger fans engaged, because if they don't, it doesn't matter how good the cars are. It's totally irrelevant. Rant over. I'll let one of you two speak now because I think I need a drink.
No, it's a good point. And the only thing Formula E got wrong with their first push into streaming services and YouTube and whatnot was, they thought, oh, we'll just get massively popular people who loads of people watch to do it. They don't know anything about it. Yeah, it doesn't matter. They're massively popular. Yeah, not going to work. When you've got people asking, who's that? Or what happens here? And they're going, I don't know. Do you know? That's just going to ruin it. If they thought just a little bit about who they got involved, Voltage would still be around now, and it would be massive. So both sides need to be smart with how they come at it. But at the moment, Formula E are going the right way.
Yeah, I agree. Voltage was wrong, but like the race is now alive on YouTube. I think I'm not sure about this season, so don't quote me. I'll have a look in it before Wednesday. Don't worry. But I think it is going to be on YouTube again this year. I think the BBC had it last year, so in that way, they're getting the race in front. Voltage, the principle of Voltage was absolutely spot on, but they just didn't quite get it right. But do you think the paywall's that big a deal, Stuart? I know you've already kind of touched on it, but
I do, yeah, and I'm aware. The TV deal varies from country to country, but in this country, it's made a massive difference on viewing figures. And I think a lot of people who watch F1 aren't necessarily hardcore F1 fans. They enjoy F1, they'll watch F1. They maybe won't watch every race, but if it's on a Sunday afternoon, it's good fun, and they know who Lewis Hamilton is and so on, and they'll tune in and watch it. They're not necessarily going to chase it, or, as you say, pay £30 a month for the honour. And we have seen massive downturn in viewing figures, and Channel 4 obviously can only show it at less good times a day. So yeah, I think this is a massive problem. I think F1 have said in the past, people who are running F1, that having this Sky deal is a problem they are stuck with.
yeah.
So it will be interesting to see what they come up with next. But we are going to have to wait till 2024, I think, until they can do anything else. At which point, a lot of the damage will have been done.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was Bernie's parting gift, wasn't it, to Liberty Media? That's how I look at it. That it was his way of giving them the middle finger. Because Liberty Media would never have signed that deal with Sky. I just can't see how they would.
That's one thing that bugs me with these massive companies, because there's so much legality and everything involved. None of them are brave enough to take that chance. I mean, you ask yourself, if we had the full F1 TV option available in the UK that worked properly and perfectly, which they have sorted by the end of the season, as I'm hearing from people. And all of the archive and everything, and you could get it in the UK for $8.99 a month. I am certain that in 1 year, that would more than cover any of the legal costs of breaching a Sky contract. I'm absolutely certain of it, because everyone would go to that.
I'm pretty sure as well that I think Sky will keep the rights, but I think they won't have exclusive rights. I can see Liberty letting Channel 4 keep the highlights, maybe letting them air them at a more reasonable time, gone midnight for the US Grand Prix for qualifying. That was ridiculous. But I can see it being, yes, Sky, you can keep the rights, but we are still going to be doing our own streaming service, and Channel 4 will be getting highlights, and we'll be showing some live on Twitch or whatever. So I think Sky will get their deal, but they'll get it watered down to what it is now, and that's fine. Sky can have it, that's fine, but as long as it's somewhere, either dirt cheap for them to watch, or somewhere, but even then behind the Liberty Media F1 TV thing, it's still behind a paywall, isn't it? I'd much rather see it just on Channel 4 or somewhere. But I'll read a couple of comments and then we'll come back to a few other talking points and wrap things up. Thomas Latrain says, my friends that have never cared about racing are getting into Formula E because it's easy to watch and understand. That's exactly it, isn't it? If Formula 1 was right in front of people, they'd be watching. I'll try and avoid the Formula E questions. Bernie Eccles has spent decades building up F1 to the superpower it is, only to completely ruin it in the last 10 years of his leadership. That's who's there again. Formula E have a paywall in Poland and need to pay for Eurosport player. So there you go. It's even Formula E's not totally in the right with that one, if you like. UK says a lot of sports have the same problem. Absolutely. I think it's just the way sport will end up going, to be honest. A few people talking about ways you can watch Formula 1 without actually... I'm not going to read them out without actually having to pay for anything. If I could just buy Sky F1 by itself, I would not, but not pay £30 a month for one channel. That's the thing. I think F1... Is F1... Sky F1's about a tenner a month or something, but you have to have the basic package as well, which takes your tally to £30 plus. And I know a lot of people I see on Twitter say, oh, £30 isn't a lot of money, but it's all relative. £30 to some people is nothing. £30 to other people, it's massively different. It's a difference between them eating and putting the heating on. Do you know what I mean? So you just can't do that one. So I won't get into the whole what £30 means to different people. One thing I did want to bring up, DRS, because a lot of people in the comment section to my little 2021 reaction-y type video thing were talking about it doesn't look like DRS is on the cars. From what I understand, DRS is staying for now, ... for now, I've written on my little notes here. It is staying around, but I think it's one of those things that's being used, Stuart, as a bit of an insurance policy. So if the 2021 regulations don't have the desired effect, then they still have DRS there, which will still give us some action, but it's something that can be removed if all goes to plan.
Yeah, that's kind of how I understood it. On the renders, you've still got the sort of pillar where the DRS is controlled. Doesn't necessarily mean it has to do anything. But I think that's fair enough. I think designing a car that has DRS in it that can be turned off makes a lot of sense. Yeah, again, looking at that render on the screen, it's I mean, I don't think there is DRS included in that wing. I can't see any part of it that could move. But being able to include it, I think is fine, and then you can get rid of it after half the year if you want to, really, or you can reduce how many DRS zones there are on a track, the kind of way the opposite of what they've been doing now. Maybe they'll wind it down the way they've kind of been increasing it year on year. But I'm not too concerned about that. I am excited about the idea that we might not need it more than I am about that it's still sort of able to be activated.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of DRS. I think everyone knows that, but it's again, it's that phrase I've used so many times, a necessary evil. It's one of Ross Brawn's lines. It's something we need in Formula 1 the way it is at the moment, but I think it's right, Jonty, to keep it in place for now, and then if everything's fine, get rid of it, because it is interesting to see F1 are even hedging their bets a little bit because they know how things have gone historically for them in rule changes. So I think it's right to keep it for now, but hopefully we won't need all these artificial bits and bobs because these cars will be able to go racing.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, it does ring alarm bells with the fact that they think they might need it, so they're not fully confident that these rules will work. Because otherwise, they would have just got rid of it, saying, "No, this is gonna sort it out. We don't need that anymore." So it does make you worry a little bit in that regard. But it's one of those things. I liken it to KERS when that first came in because it was driver operated. If it was down to me, I'd reduce the effectiveness of DRS by a good 60%, but make it available whenever they like. And then it's purely down to the driver's skill, the driver that can, keep it going through a certain sequence of corners or a gentle bend or what have you, or get it on earlier in the straight. There needs to be more driver involvement with it. And also, but alternatively, if they are going to keep it, change the zones. Have the zone happen immediately out of the corner, not for the last half. Use it to get them side by side, then do it, not get them right up to the braking zone, because that's kind of pointless.
To like reverse it effectively. So in China, you'd be straight off that corner onto that long straight, and then halfway down the DRS stops because they're side by side, and then make the move themselves.
Yeah, but I do understand that brings in, safety concerns because they're going max speed halfway down the straight, and all of a sudden they're getting an extra 15% drag. So but I do wish they'd have something earlier. At the very least, move the finish line. I hate this. Start line's halfway along the straight, but finish line is 10 feet from the corner. It completely removes any chance of last lap dash over the line dramas. That's one of the main things Baku's got going for it. You can't do it anywhere else.
Yeah.
It's a good point. We're not going to get those close finishes, are we? That I always try to fake on F1 2019, just for a great screenshot. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But is there anything, you two, I'll start with you, Stuart, if there's anything I've not covered that you really wanted to kind of bring up and get some thoughts on around the 2021 regs?
I mean, most of it, I think we've already said. I think definitely. So I guess there are two things. So one of them is when we do get to 2021, and we can have that conversation again there. I think there needs to be patience.
Yeah.
If it's not amazing straight away, I think, or if some of the cars are ugly, or I think we need to sort of take a breath and not assume this is going to be the fix all to everything we complain about in Formula One, because it's not. And I also think people just need to be. See, what I'm actually doing is talking about people's reactions to stuff. But I think that there's there's a knee-jerk reaction to sort of terminology like spec cars or spec parts, or the cars will be a bit slower and things like that kind of make people feel quite negative. And actually, these are some of the solutions that I think will yield good results on track. So yeah, I'm optimistic. I think this is going to be good, and I think the fact that people are feeling quite good about it is boding well. And I think not only are these quite thoughtful regulations, but they were presented well, and which are two things that we've sort of not happened as much previously. I think they've been very, very clear in making them look good, kind of convincing you that they are good, and that this has come from a place of research and thought about what they're actually trying to do. So yeah, what have you gauged as the actual consensus of people, sort of, if you stick your face into the fire?
I try to avoid it, as you know. I think it's been mostly positive. I mean, there are parts that people don't seem to like, which I think is going to be the case with everything, because they're not able to please everybody. Formula One. There's obviously been the usual, oh, where are the V10s, and oh, F1 was so much better in the old days, like 1988 when 3 drivers from 2 separate teams won all the races, as opposed to last year when 5 drivers from 3 teams won the races. But anyway, you've got the usual rose-tinted spectacles lot, is the best way to put it. But I think mostly positive. A lot of positivity around how good the cars look, which is great. But I have to say, I don't think the cars we have now are the ugliest we've ever seen. I think they're quite cool. I think people like the idea of financial regulations, but I would say, actually, there seems to be quite a bit of scepticism about how well it can be policed, which I found quite interesting. Because one thing Liberty were quite clear on, and Ross Brawn was desperate to say, was that we are going to police this properly. We've gone through everything we need to so that it can be policed properly. And if anybody breaches it, there are going to be penalties. But there are people saying, well, hang on a minute, what about Red Bull? They've got 2 teams. Why can't Toro Rosso, who maybe have only spent 150 million of their budget, spend 24 million developing winglets and things for the Red Bull? How are you going to police that? And I think there's a bit of scepticism around that one, but I think mostly positive, to be fair, Stuart. I don't know what things have been like on your channel and your Twitter. I know you're going to get the usual lot, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not feeling very similar things, and definitely around the cost cap. As has, I think, been one of the main criticisms from the beginning, from a decade ago. How are they going to police this? And I don't think that's enough for good reason not to do it. And I think they're going to police it in the same way that, you know, taxes and business finances are policed. They're going to have people, experts who know the rules inside out and would think, well, how would I break these rules, to double check that? And I think absolutely having draconian penalties for breaking the financial regulations need to be in place so that we don't get anyone thinking it's worth the risk.
Yeah, they've got to be tough with them as well, haven't they? They can't be. I know they're saying that the penalties are going to sort of stagger, if you like, from minor infringements could be a fine or a reprimand, but bigger infringements could be stripping of championships. That needs to be across the board. That, you know, if I'm trying not to say it, but if certain teams do it, they shouldn't get a lesser penalty than if a smaller team were to do. I'm trying so hard not to name teams here, but I think you get what I'm getting at.
Whoever that might be.
Yeah, whoever it could be. But they just need a red line. If you go over that, you will get this penalty. If you go over by this much, it's that penalty. Go over by that much, it's that penalty. And all right, Williams getting thrown out of the championship as an argument on one point isn't going to affect them. But Mercedes, if they were to do it, again, lots of ifs and buts, let's not get me in trouble. But if they were to do it, then it would hurt them more, wouldn't it? Because they'd lose their championship. But it needs to still be the same across the board. I hope they can please it. I get the scepticism, because there's a lot of frustration over the way F1 is at the moment with the way its rules are and whatnot. But hopefully they'll get it right. But I think, yeah, mostly positive. But is there anything you wanted to touch on, Jonty, that I've maybe not talked about?
I was just looking at the renderings again. The only thing that I'm actually a little concerned about is that the winglet over the front wheel. I was just looking a bit more closely, and that seems to be mounted, an extended part of the brake duct, which could be very, very concerning, because if someone gets a puncture, rips that off, it could rip off the brake duct, which is a complete DNF. They can't race without it. So,
I've not made. I mean, from an aesthetic point of view, I've not made my mind up about them. I have to be honest, but I'd never really thought about where they're mounted.
Yeah, the point for them makes total sense. Get that. To try and clean up the air coming off the front wheel. But yeah, it looks like they're extending down the brake duct. That would be a complete, instant DNF. Interesting.
Yeah, I'd never even looked at that.
I was looking today.
That's a good point, actually. I'd never thought.
Yeah, that is really interesting, because you don't normally have body parts in the zone that can be ripped off by punctures. But again, punctures will look different when you've got a lot less rubber as well. So perhaps they'll have weak points where they're attached to the brake points of the brake duct, so they can break free if anything happens.
Yeah, and someone just said, could they affect pit stops? Can you imagine someone being slightly askew with the wheel when they put it on and they snap it off?
Oh, God, yeah. Oh, that's it, Jonty. Now we're all be watching that, aren't we, for pit stops? I'm going to go away and have a proper look at that one. Never even thought.
Haas are knackered.
Yeah, that's it. Haas are finished now. No point even bothering. And McLaren, of course, in Mexico with poor Lando. Bless him. But yeah, I like the look of the cars. I think that's something I need to say again. I'll say something that won't go down very well on an F1 channel. would say, based on the renders, I prefer the look of the FE cars. I think that would have been cool if they'd gone that direction in some way. But that's what you're going to get with a spec car. That's just my view. A lot of people disagree, but you've got me thinking, Jonty, now about those, is it deflectors over the wheels? But it did actually, you brought up brakes there, and I forgot to mention that as well. I think penalties now for changing brakes too many times. I think there's going to be a restriction on how many times you can, is it change brake discs or something like that? And I think there's going to be, for first-time offenders, so the first time you change them outside of allowed changes, it's a 3-place grid drop and 2 for everyone after that, I think.
Yeah, you see, that's something I do not agree with at all.
That's
brakes
safety,
are
yeah.
an essential safety thing. If they need changing, they should be changed, and there should not be penalties for it. That's quite ridiculous.
What do you make of that one, Stuart?
Yeah, funny, I don't remember that one, but that is because that's such a safety key component of the car. That is really odd. I did miss that one actually in going through the rules, but hopefully, maybe the way the brakes are regulated, that isn't something that's going to end up being a problem. Like with a lot of these rules, actually, it's like I hope when 2021 comes, it's something we never think about. I hope we never have to think about the cost cap rules, and I hope we don't have to think about the way we think about we keep thinking about power units because they keep like running out towards the end of the season, having to be replaced. I find that really annoying. I wish people just were able to make 4 power units a year and stick to it. I hope people just make the right amount of brake stacks and they work. But yeah, I'm assuming if there's a safety issue, they will be allowed to change them the way they're allowed to change.
Yeah.
Or bring an extra set of tires or something if one of them completely fails.
Yeah, I think it works for some aspects, doesn't it? But I think brakes is a little bit too far.
Yeah.
Unless that's just, I don't know, maybe Liberty just reacting because they wanted to bring in standardised, didn't they, for the brakes? And the teams were against it. So whether that's just them trying to find another way around it, maybe. It's a bit of an odd one, I find. When you talk about a sport that's now got the halo and they've got new side protection that they're going to be bringing in next year and better absorption because of the longer note and all of this that they're going to be bringing in for 2021 on safety, and then they're like, but you can't change your brakes. It just seems a bit odd, really, and I probably shouldn't laugh, but
you see, I'd have been fine with standardized brakes.
Yeah,
because they can, they issue the discs and the pads, and they can do all of the testing themselves. So, right, these brakes need this amount of volumetric airflow to keep them cool adequately, which still offers up the freedom of them doing their own brake ducts and air control, getting the air there. But you've got the fact that they can say, no, you know exactly how much they need to be kept cool. If you didn't go with that, your problem.
I'll have a look for the article I was reading earlier, Stuart, and I'll send you that one. It might have been on Race Fans, or so, I'm sure I read something on it. If not, I may have just made that up and had a dream about it. I don't know, but it was in my notes. So yes, I will try and find an article and send it to you. But when it comes to safety, you can't be messing about with things like that. But we'll take a couple of comments from chat. We've been streaming for an hour and a half, actually, so I'll try and keep this short as possible, but get some of your comments and answer a couple of your questions as well if we can. And then we'll be calling it a day. Paris Precious 21 says, pretty soon they'll be having 1 ICE per year. I agree with I think there should be 4. I think we're going to see some penalties in Brazil, possibly Leclerc, if they can't save that power unit of his from USA. So it does give us cars out of position, which is great, but I'd rather see Leclerc, Hamilton, Verstappen fighting at the front and actually give us a scrap at the sharp end. Daniel Philpott says Grosjean Drivers Champion 2021 on a sort of dreaming. I don't think so. UK Strack says, don't you think capping development spoils the spirit of F1? Jonty, what do you reckon to See, it's my argument with this is the spirit of F1, the DNA of F1. It's great to keep it all in place, and to respect it, but at the same time, things have to move forward.
Yeah, I mean, Formula One is the rules. That is what the formula means, and it's all about how the teams make the most of what those limits are. It's just a case of have they put too many limits? I think there's still plenty of room for innovation, but time will tell.
Yeah, Magath88, how likely is it that Campos Racing will join the grid? I think F1 pretty much shut that down quite quickly, didn't they? There was a lot of rumour going around that they might be joining the sport, possibly 2021, and F1 then came out, which I have to say, Stuart, was bizarre for F1. Came out and put out a press release saying nobody's actually interested, actually responding to media rumour, which was weird. I can't ever remember that happening before.
Yeah, and especially in a in a statement that actually sounds quite negative. Yeah, nobody's interested in joining us. Sorry. Yeah, they're normally quite quiet, and maybe this is all part of this new era of F1 that sort of has its ear to the ground a bit more.
Puri Shottam butchered that. Says, do you think McLaren, Renault, and Williams will be able to fight for podiums in 2021? It's about 2021, yes. Somebody asked me the other day, actually, in the comment section, who I thought stood to make the biggest gains in 2021, and I said Williams, and I think people might have found that quite odd, but they are so far away at the back of the grid that they could find 2 seconds and still be at the back of the grid. So I think they've got the potential to find a lot of gains. They've already said they won't write off 2020. I'm surprised they're not going to. I thought they would be one of the teams to pretty much call off most of next season and just crack on with 2021 and send out a dodgy version or a slightly better version of this year's car. But I think McLaren could be sitting quite pretty, to be honest, Stuart. Mercedes power as well, so they're not going to have to worry about the reliability in theory and the power as they do with the Renault one. And if they've got the money behind them, they'll get the sponsors on board. They've got Carlos Sainz has been fantastic this year, and Lando Norris could be up there as Rookie of the Year. He's been brilliant as well. They've got 2 very good drivers. They could be sitting quite pretty for 2021.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'm glad both McLaren and Honda separately are having a sort of a big climb up from when they're in partnership, and so they will get all of those teams involved should be in quite a strong position. Still surprised by Renault at the moment.
Yeah.
Like they really just the last 5 years or so been very confusing as an entity. So I'm hoping they can still cling on there. They're not a poor team, but they are, as you said, seriously considering what they're doing in this sport and how they're spending their money. But to be honest, to answer the actual question, I think all bets are off on who could be on the podium in 2021. This is my optimistic face, but with the change of regulations and some good drivers coming up through the field and not necessarily knowing who will get the most out of interpreting these new rules, who knows? I definitely think all of those teams are fully able to get on the podium if they get things right.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at 2009, Brawn GP didn't exist 2-3 months before the season started. 2014, Mercedes become the dominant team. Red Bull out of nowhere, thanks to that rules reset in 2009, they became a dominant team, if you like, in the sport. So big rules resets can properly mix up the grid, and I'm quite excited for that. I don't think we're going to be seeing 10 teams all capable of winning and picking up podiums, but if we can get 4 or 5, I think we're sitting quite pretty on that one. But I think McLaren have got a great chance. Liam Ward says, do you think that active aerodynamics could make a comeback, and should it? I'm going to say no on that, because active suspension in particular, yeah, sort of the same, yeah. That was something that I think was not great. I mean, amazing in terms of technology, but it pretty much led to one team, literal domination for 2 years. I know they're doing things to try and stop flexi floors and things, so I think they're trying to avoid that. But do you think we should see more flexi aero, Jonty? Active stuff on the car? Or just keep it simple?
Well, I would separate flexi and active. That one, to be quite honest. But I do wish at some point we had a breakaway, like Formula X or something ridiculous, where anything goes. Active suspension, active aero, fan cars, the lot. Just to see what would happen. But you couldn't do it safety-wise, because you end up with cars that could do 350 mile an hour around the hairpin, and drivers would be passing out, which is a shame. But I don't think they should go that way, because it's more things that can fail. That's the biggest problem with it.
Yeah. I'll take a couple more. JWB Guitars. I would really like to get rid of the saving of everything. So tyres, fuels, brake discs, ICEs, etc. I think most of us would like to see these cars flat out from start to finish. But what I would say, to kind of look at it from other people's perspectives, because I know there are people out there that quite enjoy the conserving of parts, it does add something, doesn't it, to Formula One? I mean, like I say, we do want to see them flat out, don't we, Stuart? But at the same time, seeing a driver that can manage their tyres come out on top over somebody who can't, it's just another string to their bow, if that makes sense. There's just something, I'm not a big fan of it, but I think there are some areas where I quite like seeing the difference between drivers. So we get those things like, as we've said before, Jonty, Lance Stroll on the cold tyres getting great starts, and Sergio Perez can take his tyres longer than most drivers. I think it's quite cool to see that at times, but it is about the racing, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and Formula One's in this kind of middle ground, because it's not a sprint race, but it's not a full-on endurance race, but it is still quite long. So you do have these strategic elements within the race where, I mean, you could make the tyres last the whole race, but that's not as fun. And I think Pirelli being asked the very hard task of and again, it's not just tyres. I mean, there's engines and gearboxes and all kinds of things, but making things be able to run as flat out as possible for as long as possible without breaking them or having like tyres degrade particularly dramatically. Yeah, it's a tricky balance, and I think actually I do like conserving parts. I think it's amazing we can do a whole season on basically 4 engines. I know often there's a few parts changes, but considering 15 years ago we were using like a couple of engines per weekend,
Yeah.
we've become a massive way, and they'd still blow up then. It's still fell in the race. So I'm actually kind of okay. I think we're in a nice balance there. I think sometimes it goes too much towards the drivers tiptoeing around trying to save tires thing, but we're not massively away from where we need to be. I think we do still see some, as you say, we see mixed strategies appearing on track, and drivers trying to work out where to conserve and when to push and how to take advantage of it. And we've sort of seen in the last few races actually some very interesting strategies come out of that.
Finley Fletcher's asked a really good question about which rookies have impressed the most. Hold that thought. Hopefully see you at a stream post-season as well. But after Abu Dhabi, come back and ask that question, and we'll go over that a bit more detail. This is a bit more about 2021, but it's a good question that we will be looking at in the winter. So I will note that and try and remember to come back to that one. But the final one for tonight, D Wilson Music 145. What happens if after these changes to the sport, the gap between the top and bottom team doesn't change? It's sort of not a negative question, but we're going to have to look at it in that respect in some ways. I don't know, but probably the same thing that happens every time the rules change. We all moan about it.
Ferrari threatened to quit.
Ferrari threatened to quit. Red Bull say if they can't get a power unit they want, they're off. Mercedes reevaluate their position. Renault aren't sure what they're doing. We complain. The drivers complain. The team bosses complain. And then we do that for the next 30 years. And we just keep going around in the same circle, I would guess. I mean, I'm hopeful. I'm like Stuart, positive phase. I think that they are going to make a difference. I think the field will close up. I don't think it's going to have the desired effect that some people want it to have. I think there are some that think we're going to see 10 teams fighting for a championship. That's not going to happen. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm eating my words come 2021 in Abu Dhabi or whatever the final race is, but that's never going to happen. But close the field up. Just imagine that midfield this season with the chance of nicking a position from the Red Bulls or nicking a podium. It'd be even more incredible. So I don't think it would do. We just complain. I'm British, so that's all we do is complain. So that's probably why. But there just always seems to be this, doesn't there, Jonty, where what will probably end up happening is we'll all bitch about it. F1 will make 25 knee-jerk reactions over 10 years, and then we'll end up in a right mess, and they'll just be like, well, don't worry, because 2041 is coming and we'll revamp everything then.
Yeah, that seems to be highly likely. But at least it'd be reacting to things which have happened. Unlike just reacting to things which no one knows about because they haven't been tried out.
Yeah.
But I'll not get down that road again.
Overall, though, Jonty, to wrap things up, I'll stick with you first. We kind of did it at the start, but are you positive about these changes, or do you think we just need to hang fire and be optimistic, but err on the side of caution? That's my answer already there.
Yeah, I'd say positive, but I'm intrigued more than excited to see how far the designers can bend the rules before breaking them. That's always what has interested me the most. Some people coming up with crazy innovations, like how do you even think of that? Like going back to the F-duct. How did anyone even think of that?
I could see the start of 2021 in Australia, if that's where we do start. I could see another double diffuser style row, not necessarily around the diffuser, but I could see something cropping up that upsets teams if it does rock the boat a little bit too much. But yeah, Stuart, just your overall thoughts on 2021. Are you positive? You seem to be.
Yeah, I am. I'm positive not just for 2021, but for sort of, the years following 2021, because it feels like the people in control of the sport are thinking more about what they're doing, and whatever bad things come out of these regulations, they'll do something about it, and they'll have a better understanding of what's wrong and how to fix it. And I think they're getting better at negotiating with the teams as well. So I am positive about that, and intrigued is a great word, Jonty. I think the 2021 launch season is going to be fabulous, and we see all these new cars coming out and spotting all the weird stuff that appears maybe at launch, maybe on the last day of testing, that kind of thing. I think, it's going to be really interesting.
I think you're right as well. We'll need to be patient when we first see them at track, because it might not be that we get everything spot on first time round. So intrigue and patience. I like that. I should have called the stream that, shouldn't I? That would have been great. But yes, we are going to leave it there because we streamed it for an hour and 45 minutes. You can tell I haven't done this for a while on a Sunday with guests. But thank you very much to Stuart. It's been a pleasure to have you on once again, and sort of looking away from 2021 and into the immediate future. 2 races left this season. I hope you're planned up and ready to go for the winter.
I've dug my hole in the wild, and I'm ready to bed down and hibernate for 4 months. Yeah, and then it's not going to be that long till we're back at it again, watching the cars whiz around Barcelona in the snow.
Yes. Oh, not the snow again. That was terrible. Yeah, it soon comes around again, doesn't it? But it's been great to talk to you tonight again, mate. And it was a nice little chat. So thank you very much for coming along.
Cheers.
And thank you as well to Jonty. I think that was a good stream, mate. So it's good to have you on again, and hopefully we'll have a good final 2 races this season now that the gloves are off. Nothing on the line.
Yeah, that's all. It shouldn't excite us, but for some reason it does. Once there's nothing on the line, people tend to really go for it, which is bizarre. No, always fun to be back on talking. As I was saying to Stuart before we came on, a week on Tuesday, it'll be 2 years since the first time I actually streamed with you. And guess what the topic was?
Oh my God, it was, wasn't it?
Cost cutting for 2021. 2 years this has been going. We're finally talking about the results of it.
And I bet we were wrong on all of it. That's the famous. Oh no, sorry. After you stream.
Yeah, obviously we're completely wrong. But I might go back and listen again and see if we did get anything right. No, thanks for having me on, and thanks for getting involved, everyone. It always makes it more interesting when we have good questions to read.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, guys, and I'm sure I'll talk to you shortly.
Yeah, see ya.
Ta-ra.
Awesome stuff. Thank you to Stuart, and thank you to Jonty, of course, and thank you to all of you guys for tuning in. You might have noticed it on screen. I've tried to keep it quiet. The Formula E word, it returns, or the Formula E word returns on Wednesday, 8 p.m. UK time on the Formula E Word channel. There is a link in the description to that channel. So if you are interested in Formula E, then please do go over and subscribe. I'm going to be joined by obviously Dan, but also by Hazel Southwell for that one. So very much looking forward to chatting to them too about the upcoming season and previewing that one a little bit. So again, if you are interested in Formula E, then please do go and subscribe. If you're not, that's absolutely fine. But I will be back next week with the Brazilian Grand Prix preview. Brazil, I love Brazil. One of my favourite races of the year. Can't wait for that. So the preview will be out Wednesday or Thursday next week, all depending on how I get on getting set up on the other one. And then it's all the usual weekend content, qualifying, watch along, race watch along, hopefully race reaction as well. And of course the debrief too, plus lots of ramble over on Twitter. So do make sure you're following me over on social media. All of the links you need for that are in the description down below. I'll take a breath and get ready for this one. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean. This has been the F1 Word. And until next time, goodbye.